This just in, Israel's general election has been brought forward to April 9th. The decision to call in early elections ahead of the scheduled date in November was reached by the government coalition party heads with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday. They issued an announcement saying, out of budgetary and national responsibility, the leaders of the coalition parties have unanimously decided to dissolve the Knesset and conduct parliamentary elections in early April after serving 4 full years in office. The Knesset will be dissolved on the coming Wednesday. And now to our top headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday named Deputy Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan as the new Defense Secretary as of January 1st. He tweeted the appointment following Jim Mattis's resignation earlier this week, which was supposed to go into effect at the end of February, thereby hastening his departure. In the same tweet, Trump put down Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan for his strident threats of military operations to deal with the Syrian Kurds and ISIS as soon as the Americans were gone. Trump said, "I just had a long and productive call with President Erdogan of Turkey. We discussed ISIS, our mutual involvement in Syria, and the slow and highly coordinated pullout of U.S. troops from the area. After many years, they are coming home." In other words, the U.S. was slowing down troop withdrawal from northern and eastern Syria to a time as it suited the administration and not Erdogan and his ambitious plans. In recent days, Erdogan has continually boasted in the Turkish media of a massive Turkish force ready to cross into northern Syria, confront the Kurds, and seize control of all of northern Syria. However, Depka sources revealed that in reality, Erdogan does not have the military power to make such a move, and the U.S. troop pullout from Syria would expose his empty threats. Depka sources also revealed that according to Washington sources, Erdogan had made a panicked phone call to Trump early on Sunday, asking to slow down the U.S. troop pullout from Syria.
Yaklaşık 500 kilometrelik sınır hattı boyunca özellikle de Amerikan askerlerine asla zarar vermeyecek şekilde kendi planlamamıza uygun yerlerden Suriye topraklarındaki operasyonlarımıza her an başlayabiliriz. Kahraman ordumuz hazırlıklarını ve planlarını tamamlamış durumda. Hep söylüyorum ya, bir gece ansızın gelebiliriz.
In related news, Erdogan has also lashed out against Israel in the Turkish media. On Saturday, he told an audience of Turkish youth that Jews in Israel kick people when they're lying on the ground, not just men, but women and children as well. As Muslims, we'll teach them a lesson. In response, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu replied that Erdogan, the occupier of northern Cyprus, whose army massacres women and children in Kurdish villages inside and outside Turkey, shouldn't preach to Israel. Following the backlash from President Donald Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. troops from northeastern Syria, Depka sources have revealed a series of clarifications provided by senior administration officials. Mainly, the officials have said that U.S. troops will leave eastern and northern Syria, but America will not desert this part of the country. They did not reveal the nature of this continuing presence. However, President Trump has said that the troop pullout would be phased out within 40 to 60 days, but the U.S. officials say a more realistic timeline would be 4 to 6 months. During that time, the official said, Syria may see many developments that will require Washington to revise its plans. Furthermore, in response to criticism that the U.S. had abandoned its allies, mainly the Kurds, officials stressed that the Trump administration has not abandoned them and that the Kurds are aware of this, and that this is the reason why, despite loud cries of dismay, not a single Syrian Kurdish militiaman has deserted the lines they hold against ISIS in eastern Syria. Regarding Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan's declaration that the Turkish army would march on the East Euphrates and reach the Kurdish capital of Kamishli, sparking fear of a massacre, the U.S. official had advised distinguishing between talk and deeds. They referred to a phone conversation between President Trump and Erdogan earlier this month on December 14th, in which Erdogan promised the Turkish army would not cross the Euphrates. In a speech welcoming the U.S. pullout from Syria on Friday, Erdogan echoed these sentiments, saying that Turkey would wait a little longer before launching the operation, and that it would count on U.S. logistical support in doing so.
Sayın Trump'la da yaptığımız görüşme neticesinde bize şunu söyledi. Buradan DAEŞ'i siz temizler misiniz? Biz temizledik ve bundan sonra da temizleriz. Yeter ki sizler lojistik anlamda bizlere gerekli desteği verin. Ve çekilmeye başladılar mı? Başladılar. Şimdi hedef bu diplomatik ilişkilerimizi sağlıklı bir şekilde sürdürmek, gerek Sayın Trump'la yaptığımız telefon görüşmesi, gerek diplomasi ve güvenlik birimlerimizin temasları, gerekse Amerikan tarafından yapılan açıklamalar bizi bir müddet daha beklemeye yöneltti. Tabii bu ucu açık bir bekleme süreci değildir. Önümüzdeki aylarda Suriye sahasında hem PKK, PYD unsurlarını hem de DAEŞ kalıntılarını ortadan kaldıracak bir harekat tarzı izleyeceğiz. Bunun bilinmesi lazım.
Depka sources also revealed that the officials said the U.S. and Iraq are in advanced negotiations for the deployment of the Iraqi Special Operating Forces, or ISOF, to the Iraqi-Syria border. These special forces, also known as the Golden Division, drove ISIS out of Mosul and are expected to stand in the path of Iranian and Iraqi Shiite militias crossing into Syria. Part of the ISOF's deployment will include the western Iraqi province of Anbar, where the U.S. Army is said to be building a new base. This would position U.S. troops 30 kilometers north of the Euphrates River and near the Syrian border, and will provide the Iraqi division with American backup. With regards to Russia, the U.S. officials refused to confirm or deny Russian involvement in the forthcoming U.S. plans for Syria, nor would they refer to a possible U.S.-Turkish-Russian deal on the issue. They did, however, take note of the strides taken towards repairing Russian-Israeli relations in recent weeks. The U.S. troop exit from Syria announced this past week by President Donald Trump has sent shockwaves through the Middle East. Depka sources take a look at the fallout for all key players in the region. Who are the main winners and who are the losers of this U.S. move? The first country to benefit from the pullout is Russia. President Vladimir Putin will become the unchallenged strongman of Syria for years to come, and his army will no longer be restricted to a couple of bases, but will be able to reign supreme in most parts of the country. Still, the Russian leader will be saddled with problems. He will have to contain Iran's influence in Damascus and cope with the re-emerging ISIS threat, while short of funds for the vast project of reconstruction facing Syria after its devastating 7-year war.
I have to tell you that whether he's talking to Vladimir Putin or Erdogan, these autocrats have him enthralled. And after a conversation, he'll make snap judgments and avoid the best advice that he could from people like General Mattis.
Look, the idea that Putin is happy about this is ridiculous. He's not. This puts a greater emphasis and makes them have to actually step up and do something and do more in the region. It puts them at a greater risk. So I think that's just silly.
The second key player to benefit is Iran and its commander of the Revolutionary Guards, Al-Quds Brigade's General Qassem Soleimani. The general was responsible for Iran's decisive contribution to Syrian President Bashar Assad's victory against the Syrian insurgency, and he remodeled Hezbollah's militia to become the strongest army in Lebanon. The general also designed the battle for wresting Kirkuk and its oil fields from Iraqi Kurds, and engineered Hamas's 9-month anti-Israel campaign from the Gaza Strip, as well as cemented Iran's military presence in Syria. No doubt the Iranian general will take credit for all of these feats, capped by the U.S. exit from Syria. According to Depka, Soleimani will claim that Washington will undermine its position in the Middle East and weaken the impact of its sanctions against Iran. And of course, the U.S. withdrawal deals a heavy blow to Israel. Its military and intelligence posture has hinged on the presumption of American boots on the ground in eastern and northern Syria as a barrier against pro-Iranian Iraqi militias crossing in to fight Israel in Syria and Lebanon. The U.S. presence was a reassuring counterweight to the Russian presence in the country. Its departure will now leave Israel standing alone against both Iranian and Russian forces and their shared interests and actions. Israel's government, army, and intelligence now suddenly have to face the immense task of overhauling its military, something that can run into the billions of dollars. According to Depka, the Syrian front will have to be rebuilt and reinforced after 2 years in which Israel counted on U.S.-Russian understandings to keep the Syrian border calm.
We'll continue to act in Syria to prevent Iran's effort to militarily entrench itself against us. We're not going to reduce our efforts, we're going to increase our efforts.
Jordan and King Abdullah are also regional players affected by the U.S. troop withdrawal. The country suddenly finds itself exposed to Syria from the north, where Assad is gaining strength from the Lebanese Hezbollah and boosted by pro-Iranian militias sitting on their border directly from Tehran. Revolutionary Shiite Iran has always regarded the overthrow of a Sunni Hashemite king in Amman as a desired feat. With the U.S. presence gone in Syria, Jordan now faces concerns of Iran's growing arm in the region. According to Depka sources, when the news of the imminent U.S. departure from Syria landed in Amman, King Abdullah contacted President Trump and asked him to delay the move from the Al Tanaf base, which guards the Syrian-Jordanian border. He asked for time to prepare Jordan's military to fill the void and face an unexpected new Iranian threat. Following Trump's announcements, U.S. officials were quick to state that the U.S. would not withdraw the 5,000 troops from Iraq as well as Syria. Though the removal of troops from Syria and the opening of the Syrian-Iraqi border to free Iranian and pro-Iranian passage will only serve to strengthen Iran's hold on Baghdad and weaken Sunni and Saudi influence in the country. And with regards to Saudi Arabia, Depka sources explain that it is hard to see how the Sunni-led moderate alliance that the Trump administration had worked so hard to fashion by bringing in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and United Arab Emirates under the U.S.'s wing will now survive this sudden decision. With us to discuss the U.S. troop withdrawal from Syria and its repercussions is Bar-Ilan University professor and an expert on Israel-Arab affairs, Dr. Mordechai Dow. Thanks for joining us.
A pleasure.
So let's start with the main question on everyone's mind. How will the U.S. withdrawal affect Israel?
Well, before it affects Israel, it affects Syria. After all, they withdraw from Syria. On the first glance, it looks like a bad thing, because now the Kurds will be exposed to the Turkish attacks. And maybe Iran as well will feel more free to do whatever Iran likes in Syria. But in a second thought, you can see the good sides of this withdrawal, because if Turkey comes into Syria in order to take care of the Kurds, on the same way, they will take care of the Iranians as well. Not because they don't see the same way the Iranians desire to keep Assad in power. This definitely Erdogan can live with. The problem is that Erdogan does not like the fact that Iran actually exchanges the population in Syria from Sunni one to Shi'i. And this is something which he will stop in any possible way. And this might bring both Iran and Turkey into a clash on the Syrian soil. And this is the good part of the American withdrawal from Syria.
So what you're saying is Israel might actually benefit from this move in sort of informing a rift between Iran and Turkey.
The whole world will benefit, because if Turkey defeats the Iranians, and Turkey will defeat the Iranians, no doubt, this will benefit the whole world.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any negative side to this for Israel?
Yes. Don't forget that the Kurds are in a way or another allies to the state of Israel. Yet, they know that Israel cannot help them. Israel will not send the army over Syria in order to help them in their district in the northeastern part of Syria, which is far away from Israel. They don't expect it. Yet, the fact that a small nation like the Kurds are being left to predators like the Turks is not good, because Israel is also a small nation surrounded by predators.
Mm-hmm. And what about Russia? What about its role in the region now?
Russia, as much as I predict, will not do much about Syria, because Russia is only about Russia. Russia wants to take care of its own interests in Syria, which is more or less the seashore and a few bases which they have there, the Assad regime, and control over the gas which Syria has, both on the land and in the sea.
Mm-hmm. Now, Israel is not going to allow Iran to establish sort of a Shiite arc, right, from Iran all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Do you see any sort of future Israeli-Turkish cooperation in halting Iran's advances?
Not cooperation, because anyone who cooperates with Israel is viewed as a collaborator with the enemy. If Erdogan, if Turkey really stops Iran from taking Syria over, Israel will sit idly in the side to see its job being done by others.
Mm-hmm. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he sees Israel's role in Syria sort of increasing, escalating to combat Iran. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, he said this before the American announcement about withdrawing the American troops. And don't forget, here in the Middle East, You shape your policy every morning when you see the new sun rises over the horizon. Now you see a new picture in many cases and in many days, and you shape your new policy vis-a-vis the new vision which you see on the ground.
Okay. Dr. Mordechai Dow, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
A new U.S.-Africa policy was unveiled earlier this month by National Security Advisor John Bolton with the aim of combating the predatory practices of China and Russia. It was approved by President Donald Trump for immediate application. Depka sources have revealed, in a speech to the Heritage Foundation think tank in Washington, Bolton revealed that the new policy would put U.S. interests first on a continent where the U.S. was losing ground to China and Russia. He said the countries were using their investment and trade to gain leverage on African governments, often through corrupt means. As examples, Bolton accused China of using Zambia's $10 billion debate to seize its national power company and the debt run up by Djibouti to win a military base, a base that was close to the U.S. base camp Le Monnier. With regards to Russia, Bolton said it sold arms and energy in exchange for votes in the UN, which helped keep strong men in power counter to the best interests of the African people. Bolton stressed that the U.S. will no longer support unproductive and unaccountable UN peacekeeping missions, starting in the Western Sahara, and the U.S. also threatened to cut funds for missions in the Central African Republic and the Democratic Republic of Congo. According to Depka's sources, there were a number of major catalysts that led to the new Africa policy. First and foremost, according to Depka, Trump, who had barely noticed Africa until now, was irked to discover that Russia and Europe, led by Italy and managed under the auspices of UN peacekeeping forces, were deeply involved in the conflict raging in Libya over its oil wealth. As such, the Trump administration further discovered that the Russian-European drive into Africa counted heavily on the UN peacekeeping missions, which are largely funded by the United States. According to Depka, the U.S. was equally alarmed by China's penetration of the strategic Horn of African ports of Djibouti and Port Sudan on the Red Sea, and of Israel's Haifa port on the Mediterranean. Finally, with regards to Israel, the Trump administration is closely following Israel's latest steps in Africa, especially following the visit of Israel of Chad President Idris Deby in November. According to Depka sources, the U.S. administration is concerned that Israel has overstepped a boundary by getting involved militarily with Western and Central African countries. Washington made its displeasure known to Jerusalem in an unprecedented step when earlier this month the U.S. Department of the Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control imposed sanctions on 3 individuals, including Israeli former General Israel Ziv, for his actions in South Sudan.